Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Texas Podcast. I am your host, Gabe, and today we will be finishing up on the siege of the Alamo. We are now on March 4th through the 6th. We are in the final 3 days of the siege. Now, let's get right into this. The Mexican bombardment recommenced early on March 4th that afternoon. Santa Anna called a council of war with his senior officers. He proposed an imminent attack on the fort. Many of his officers disagreed, recommending instead that they wait for the arrival of the heavy artillery. Two 12-pound cannons with the capability to quickly destroy the Alamo walls were due to arrive in Behar on Monday, March 7th. According to later reports by Filisola, on the evening of March 4th, a woman from Behar informed Santa Anna that Travis and his men were planning to either surrender or escape if reinforcements did not arrive quickly. Many years later, Susanna Dickinson commented that Juana Owsbury left the fort that evening. Dickinson believed that Owsbury had deserted to provide Santa Anna with information about the Texan troops' strength. Edmondson notes that Owsbury's returned to the Alamo, and he speculates that Travis sent her to try to negotiate an honorable surrender for the Texan troops. According to Todish, more than one historian and even some of Santa Anna's own officers have speculated that this information is what prompted him to push for an immediate assault rather than wait for his heavy siege guns. There would have been little glory in a bloodless victory. Glory is what Santa Anna craved above all else. Saturday, March 5th, marked a brief departure from the frigid temperatures of the preceding days, as the air warmed to between 50 and 68 degrees. That morning, Santa Anna called another staff meeting and announced that the assault would commence the following day. Again, officers advocated waiting for the arrival of the heavy artillery. According to his aide, Fernando Urizo, Santa Anna responded, "What are the lives of soldiers than so many chickens? I tell you the Alamo must fall, and my orders must be obeyed at all hazards. If our soldiers are driven back, the next line in their rear must force those before them forward, and compel them to scale the walls, cost what it may." The decision made General Juan Valentin Amador drew up detailed battle orders. The orders instructed all men to wear shoes or sandals and to properly tie their shackled chin straps. Despite the cold, soldiers were prohibited from wearing cloaks or blankets, as they might limit their movement on the battlefield. Each soldier would receive 4 to 6 rounds of ammunition and would be given 2 flints. The Mexican soldiers would be divided into 4 columns. Coast would command the first column, consisting of the Alamo Battalion and 3 companies of the San Luis Battalion. The remaining rifle companies of the San Luis Battalion, as well as the Toluca Battalion, would be under the command of Colonel Francisco Duque. A third column, commanded by Colonel Jose Maria Romero, comprised the rifle companies from the Matamoros and Jimenez battalions. The scouting companies of the Matamoros, Jimenez, and San Luis battalions would form the 4th column. Under Juan Morales, Santa Anna would command the reserve force, primarily the grenadier companies from each of the battalions. The cavalry would guard the camp and patrol the area around the battlefield to stop any soldier, Texan or Mexican, who attempted to desert. Although not explicitly codified in the orders, Santa Anna ensured that the presidial troops who had been previously stationed in Behar did not take part in the fighting. This would ensure that relatives were not forced to fight each other. That evening, James Allen became the last courier to leave the Alamo, carrying messages from Travis and several of the other men. Legend holds that at some point on March 5th, Travis gathered his men and explained that an attack was likely imminent, and that the Mexican army would likely prevail. He supposedly drew a line in the sand and asked those willing to die for the Texan cause to cross and stand alongside him. A bedridden Bowie requested that Crockett and several others carry his cot over the line, leaving only one man, Luis Moses Rose, on the other side. Explaining that he was not ready to die, Rose escaped that evening. This episode was first mentioned in a newspaper article written 35 years after the Alamo fell by a reporter who said his parents heard the story directly from Rose. The reporter had admitted to embellishing pieces of the article, and as Rose had died by the time the story was published, so the story could not be authenticated. Years after the story was published, Alamo survivors Susanna Dickinson and Enrique Esparza mentioned the incident, but many details conflicted. At 10 p.m., the Mexican artillery ceased their bombardment. As Santa Anna had planned, the exhausted Texans soon fell into a deep sleep, the first uninterrupted sleep they had got in many days since the siege began. 3 Texans were sent to act as sentries outside the walls. March 6th. At midnight, Mexican soldiers began silently moving towards their places to await the start of the battle. The Texan sentries were surprised and killed quickly before they could raise an alarm. Despite the orders to forego overcoats, cloaks, and blankets, the men were instructed to lay on their stomachs on the cold, damp grass. Although the original orders gave the battle starting time as 4 a.m., the soldiers were not completely in place until about 5 a.m. Some were stationed within 300 feet of the Alamo. At 5:30 a.m., Santa Anna gave the order for the advance, and his excited troops began shouting, "Viva Santa Anna and Viva la República!" The shouting woke Texans, but by the time they reached their posts, the Mexican soldiers were already within musket range. I want to thank y'all all for watching. In the next video, we'll cover the Battle of the Alamo, the final assault, so stay tuned.